As of January 2024, Venezuela continues to face a political and economic crisis. Here are some key points. Political crisis. Nicolas Maduro has been in power since 2013. His socialist PSUV party has gained control of key institutions, including much of the judiciary, the Electoral Council, and the Supreme Court. This has resulted in a weakened system of checks and balances. In 2018, Maduro was re-elected in a presidential election widely dismissed as neither free nor fair. Despite opposition leader Juan Guaidó declaring himself interim president in 2019, Maduro remained firmly in charge with the support of the military, China, and Russia. Economic crisis. Venezuela, which relies almost entirely on oil revenue for its income, went into a 7-year recession after global oil prices plummeted. Inflation skyrocketed and shortages of basic goods became widespread. However, the economy started growing again in 2021 after Maduro relaxed some of the strict foreign currency regulations. Migration crisis. More than 7.5 million people have left the country since 2015 due to economic hardship and political repression. This is the second largest migration crisis in the world. Current developments. The majority of opposition parties withdrew their support from Guaidó in December 2022 and dissolved his interim government. In October 2023, the opposition organized a primary to choose a unity candidate for the upcoming presidential election. Please note that this information is current as of January 2024, and the situation may have changed since then. China and Russia have played significant roles in Venezuela's ongoing crisis. China's role. China has loaned more money to Venezuela, some $60 billion, than to any other country in the world and is Venezuela's largest lender. Despite Venezuela's economic and political crises, Beijing has remained mostly silent. China has been Venezuela's major financial crutch. Over the past decade, Beijing has lent Caracas some $70 billion, mostly for development projects, in exchange for future oil shipments. In recent years, China has grown increasingly wary of Venezuela defaulting on its payments, and it has opened communication channels with the opposition. Russia's role. Russia has been one of Venezuela's closest allies since 2006, when President Hugo Chavez signed a $2.9 billion arms deal in exchange for Russian fighter aircraft. Russia is Venezuela's largest supplier of weapons, having sold the country more than $10 billion in hardware since the mid-2000s. Russia has been a lender of last resort. In late 2017, Moscow bailed Venezuela out by restructuring more than $3 billion in sovereign debt. Russia's state-backed oil giant Rosneft is one of Venezuela's largest foreign backers, loaning it roughly $2.5 billion in recent years in exchange for future energy shipments. Both countries have significant economic and political interests in Venezuela, and their support has been crucial for the Maduro regime's survival. However, their roles have been criticized internationally due to the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. The relationship between Venezuela and the United States has been complex and has evolved over time. Historical relations. The United States established diplomatic relations with Venezuela in 1835. Relations with the U.S. were strong under democratic governments in Venezuela, such as those of Carlos Andrés Pérez and Rafael Caldera. Political tensions. Tensions increased after President Hugo Chavez assumed elected office in 1999 and declared himself socialist and anti-imperialist, in reference to being against the government of the United States. The United States recognizes the 2015 democratically elected Venezuelan National Assembly as the only legitimate branch of the government of Venezuela. Economic relations. Venezuela's relations with the United States have traditionally been characterized by an important trade and investment relationship as well as cooperation in combating the production and transit of illegal drugs. Humanitarian assistance. Since 2017, the United States has provided nearly $2.8 billion in humanitarian, economic, development, and health assistance to support Venezuelans inside Venezuela and throughout the region. Current developments. During the 2019 Venezuelan presidential crisis, Nicolas Maduro announced that Venezuela was breaking ties with the United States, following President Trump's announcement that the U.S. recognized Juan Guaidó, the president of the National Assembly, as the interim president. Although the United States stopped recognizing Guaidó's presidential claim when the opposition National Assembly's vote to dissolve Guaidó's interim government took effect in 2023, the U.S. continues to recognize the 2015 National Assembly. Please note that this information is current as of January 2024, and the situation may have changed since then. Venezuela's crisis has had significant impacts on other countries in Latin America. Economic impact. The exodus of nearly 8 million Venezuelan migrants who have fled poverty and political turmoil is boosting the economies of other countries across South America. The foreign workforce will lift the economies of their main host nations in Latin America and the Caribbean by 0.10 to 0.25% on average each year from 2017 until 2030. If access to jobs were increased for Venezuelans migrants, the economic benefits could be greater still. Migration crisis. More than 6.5 million of the 7.7 million people who have left Venezuela have sought a better life in Latin America and the Caribbean, particularly in Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. This migration crisis is now the largest in the history of Latin America and exceeds the number of people displaced from war-torn Syria. Social impact. While Venezuelans are often blamed for straining healthcare systems and economies across the region, their contribution to the labor force actually benefits local economies by filling undesirable jobs and increasing local demand for goods and services, which increases tax revenue. Political impact. The crisis in Venezuela has also led to political tensions in the region. For instance, Brazil's President Michel Temer has warned that the Venezuelan migration crisis is now a threat to the peace of all of South America. Please note that this information is current as of February 2024, and the situation may have changed since then. The Lima Group is a coalition of ideologically related countries that emerged in response to the deepening political, social, economic, and humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. Here are some key points about its role. Multilateral diplomacy. The Lima Group exercises multilateral diplomacy to defend democratic institutions in Venezuela. It was formed in 2017 and includes countries from across the Americas. Political stance. The group has progressively radicalized its discourse, transitioning from mediation diplomacy to confrontation diplomacy centered on the international isolation of Nicolas Maduro's rule. Achievements and challenges. The Lima Group has faced both achievements and challenges in its diplomatic management. It has identified the limits and possibilities of this multilateral mechanism in the short term. Non-military intervention. The Lima Group has reiterated its conviction that the transition to democracy must be conducted by the Venezuelans themselves peacefully and within the framework of the Constitution and international law, supported by political and diplomatic means without the use of force. International Criminal Court (ICC). The group has affirmed that actions will be promoted before the ICC, considering the serious humanitarian situation in Venezuela, the criminal violence of the Nicolas Maduro regime against the civilian population, and the denial of access to international assistance, which constitutes a crime against humanity. Please note that this information is current as of February 2024, and the situation may have changed since then. The United Nations (UN) has been actively involved in addressing the crisis in Venezuela through various means. Humanitarian aid. The UN has been providing humanitarian aid to Venezuela, contributing to the work of different agencies and partners to advance the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Fact-finding missions. The UN has conducted independent international fact-finding missions in Venezuela to investigate human rights violations. These missions have found that the Venezuelan state's military and civilian intelligence agencies have been involved in crimes against humanity to repress dissent. Reports and recommendations. The UN has released reports detailing the responsibilities for crimes against humanity in Venezuela and has urged authorities to investigate and prosecute accordingly. It has also highlighted the situation in remote mining areas of the country. Political dialogue. The UN Security Council has held discussions on the political and humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. The aim is to press for free and fair elections and a peaceful resolution to the crisis. Please note that this information is current as of February 2024, and the situation may have changed since then. The International Criminal Court (ICC) has played a significant role in addressing the crisis in Venezuela. Investigation. The ICC has been investigating whether crimes against humanity were committed during Venezuela's crackdown on anti-government protests in 2017. The ICC inquiry focuses on alleged crimes against humanity committed in Venezuela since at least 2017, including deprivation of physical liberty, torture, rape, and other forms of sexual violence, as well as persecution on political grounds. Decision to proceed. On June 27, 2023, ICC judges announced that the investigation by the Office of the Prosecutor into alleged crimes against humanity in the country can go ahead. This decision followed a petition by the ICC prosecutor to continue his investigation after the Venezuelan government asked the court in April 2022 to defer to the government's own inquiries. Scope of investigation. ICC judges concluded that while Venezuela is taking some investigative steps, its domestic criminal proceedings do not sufficiently mirror the scope of the prosecution's intended investigation, to warrant a deferral of the investigation to domestic authorities. In particular, the judges found that domestic proceedings have only focused on direct and low-level rights abusers and that Venezuelan authorities have not investigated and do not intend to investigate fact-based allegations about possible crimes against humanity. Impact: the ICC's decision to proceed with the investigation holds out hope for a measure of justice for victims of serious human rights violations committed by the Maduro government. Please note that this information is current as of February 2024, and the situation may have changed since then.